A day at the salon, a discomforting start. New York City is a place where every street, every neighborhood, holds a new story waiting to be discovered. It is a vibrant city, full of life, energy, and a rich diversity that sets it apart from most places in the world. People from all walks of life converge here with dreams in their hearts, from artists to entrepreneurs, immigrants to native New Yorkers, each contributing to the city's unique mosaic. Leona Harris had only recently moved to the city, a powerful and accomplished black businesswoman in her mid-30s. She had been running a successful cosmetics company back in her hometown in Chicago but felt New York was the right place to take her career to new heights. Her company, Curl Glow, specialized in haircare products for textured and curly hair, something that had long been neglected by mainstream beauty brands. It was a passion project that grew into a mission to empower women of color to embrace their natural hair textures and take pride in them. Leona had been traveling a lot for work, and the stress of setting up her new office in the city had left her drained. She was overwhelmed by meetings, deadlines, and the pressure of breaking into a new market. For once, she just wanted a break. A simple pleasure. A moment of relaxation. After a long week of unpacking boxes, meeting with distributors, and finalizing business deals, Leona decided to treat herself to a simple salon visit. It wasn't anything grand or extravagant, just a wash and a blowout. Something to give her the small comfort of feeling pampered. It wasn't just about the haircut, it was about stepping into a space where she could disconnect from work for a while and breathe. She did some quick research online and found a nearby salon in Harlem that had good reviews, Rachel's Beauty Spot. It wasn't an upscale, 5-star spa, but it seemed like a nice, cozy place. Leona, always a fan of supporting local businesses, made a mental note to check it out. Harlem had its own energy, its own charm, and she liked the idea of seeing what kind of experience this neighborhood salon had to offer. Leona called to make an appointment, and the receptionist, a woman with a distant voice, answered the phone. She sounded rushed but polite enough to schedule Leona's visit for the following day. No questions about her hair type, no attempt to personalize the call, just a quick confirmation of the time. The next afternoon, Leona walked into the salon, a little more dressed up than usual since she had just come from an important meeting. The interior was a blend of old and new, with posters of beauty products from different eras hanging on the walls and a few modern styling stations in the back. There were only a few customers inside, most of them were white women with straight hair, sipping coffee or flipping through magazines. Leona was used to being one of the few black women in a beauty setting like this. It wasn't something that fazed her anymore. Rachel, the salon's owner, came up to greet her. She was a woman in her mid-40s, with a sharp bob haircut, a crisp apron, and a business-like manner. "Hi, you must be Leona. I'm Rachel, and I'll be taking care of you today." She didn't offer a handshake, but instead just gestured to a chair in the corner. Leona smiled politely and nodded. She didn't want to make waves, she simply wanted to unwind. "Shall we get started?" Rachel asked, her voice clipped but efficient. Leona nodded and followed her to the back area where the wash station was set up. The seat was a little uncomfortable, but Leona didn't mind, it was a small thing. As Rachel began to wet Leona's hair, Leona felt the tension begin to rise. She noticed the way Rachel's hands moved with hesitation, the way she fidgeted with the water temperature. Leona had always been particular about her hair. After all, she was the founder of a company that specialized in textured haircare. But she didn't want to come off as too critical, so she stayed quiet, allowing Rachel to do her work. "Your hair is really thick," Rachel commented after a few moments, as if the texture of Leona's curls had surprised her. "It's going to take a lot of product to get it to behave. But don't worry, I've got something for that." Leona smiled politely, trying to brush off the discomfort. "It's not hard to manage," she said. "Just requires the right products and a little care." But Rachel, unfazed by Leona's response, muttered something under her breath. "I bet. This kind of hair always needs extra attention." Leona's smile faltered slightly, but she didn't say anything. She had dealt with comments like this her entire life. People often had preconceived notions about black hair, about how much work it was, how unruly or difficult it could be. What she didn't expect was for Rachel to turn around and, with a certain casualness, pick up a box from the shelf labeled laundry detergent. Leona's stomach dropped. She paused, her fingers still in the water, as Rachel added, "You know, this is the only thing that works on hair like yours. My clients with curly hair, they all love it. Just trust me." Rachel's tone was matter-of-fact, as if she was explaining a simple recipe. Leona's eyes widened. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Excuse me," she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did you just say, laundry detergent?" Rachel didn't seem to notice the shock in Leona's voice. "Oh, yeah. It's the best way to break down oils and buildup. I've been using it for years. Trust me, it'll work wonders on your hair." Leona sat there, stunned. Her mind raced. Laundry detergent? Was she being serious? Her scalp was sensitive, her hair delicate. It had taken years of trial and error to find the right products that worked for her texture. And now, here was Rachel, casually grabbing something meant for clothes to fix her hair. But as she sat there, Leona realized that this moment was more than just a personal insult. It was a glimpse into something much larger. It wasn't just Rachel's ignorance about textured hair, it was a reflection of a deeper issue, the way society often dismissed black beauty and black hair as something to be fixed or tamed rather than celebrated and respected. She took a deep breath, keeping her voice calm, but firm. "Do you use this on your other clients' hair?" she asked, trying to keep the conversation as neutral as possible. Rachel, clearly taken aback, gave a short laugh. "Well, no. But your hair isn't like theirs, is it?" The words hung in the air for a moment, thick with meaning. Leona felt her heart beat faster, but she swallowed her anger. She had been in situations like this before, people who didn't understand or respect her culture, her hair, or her identity. But this time, something inside her clicked. She wasn't going to let it slide. Instead of reacting with the fury that burned inside her, Leona took a deep breath. Her gaze met Rachel's, and for a brief moment, Rachel seemed to sense that something was wrong. Leona, however, chose not to make a scene. "Not yet." "All right," Leona said quietly, her voice steady but with an edge. "Go ahead. Let's see what happens." Unseen power, the weight, the revelation, and the decision. Leona Harris sat back in the chair, her mind racing as Rachel, seemingly oblivious to the tension in the air, began to squeeze the laundry detergent into her hands. She didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or stand up and walk out. But something held her there, something deeper than the immediate insult of having her hair treated as though it were a dirty laundry pile to be scrubbed with harsh chemicals. Leona had faced discrimination before, yes. She had been the subject of offhand comments about her hair, her appearance, her skin tone. But this was different. This wasn't just a passing remark or an uncomfortable glance from someone who didn't understand her culture. This was intentional ignorance, a lack of respect so blatant that it seemed to make the air thick with frustration. The last thing Leona wanted was drama. She didn't need to make a scene. She had worked too hard to be the person who always took the high road, who made sure her presence wasn't defined by others' prejudices. But the question gnawed at her: why was it always up to her to absorb the ignorance of others? Why should she, time and time again, be the one who quietly absorbed the sting of microaggressions, the sting of racist undertones, without standing up for herself? And yet, as Rachel poured the detergent into her hands, Leona realized that sometimes, standing up for yourself meant something more than just confronting a person in the moment. It meant showing them, through actions, that their ignorance wouldn't go unnoticed. It meant not letting this experience be another in a long line of invisible, unchallenged instances where black voices were silenced by disrespect. As Rachel began lathering the detergent into Leona's scalp with a matter-of-fact expression on her face, Leona felt an uncomfortable heat spread across her skin. Her scalp tightened as if it could sense the corrosive nature of the product, even before the smell hit her nostrils, a strange mixture of chemicals and something industrial, far from the gentle fragrances she was used to in haircare products designed for textured hair. Rachel continued to apply the detergent with a level of care that suggested she believed she was doing something beneficial. She was so focused on the task that she didn't even glance at Leona, oblivious to the tension building in the air between them. Leona's mind wandered. She thought about her childhood, those early years spent with her mother, learning how to take care of her natural hair. Her mother, a woman of fierce pride and dignity, had taught her to love her curls, to treat them with care and respect. She could still hear her mother's voice, "Our hair is not just hair. It's part of who we are. It has a history. It deserves respect." And yet here, in this salon, her hair, her very identity, was being dismissed in the most shocking way possible. But even as Leona's frustration grew, she reminded herself of something that she had always known: there was power in how you responded to moments like this. Power in choosing how to handle disrespect. Power in choosing your next move carefully. Because in situations like this, the wrong reaction could escalate things further, but the right one could create an opening to educate, to elevate, and to leave a lasting impact. Still, the sensation of the detergent scraping against her scalp didn't make it easy to stay calm. Her head began to itch almost immediately, and the gritty, detergent-like texture of the substance only seemed to make things worse. She wanted to stand up, demand that Rachel stop. But something in her restrained her. As Rachel worked her way through the curls, scrubbing them with an enthusiasm that felt almost too aggressive, Leona closed her eyes for a moment. She felt her heartbeat quicken, and a wave of irritation washed over her. The anger was sharp but controlled. She had faced too much of this type of ignorance before. As a child, she had been told her hair was too wild, that it was unprofessional or unmanageable. She had spent years learning to love and accept her hair as it was, despite the world's attempts to make her feel less than. But now, this woman, Rachel, had crossed a line. It wasn't just about the product, it was about the attitude. The assumption that Leona's hair needed fixing. The disregard for the history of textured hair and the hundreds of products created specifically for it. The implication that, because Leona's hair wasn't straight or normal, it wasn't worth treating with the care it deserved. The salon was quiet except for the soft hum of hairdryers in the distance and the occasional murmur from other clients who were either ignoring the situation or simply pretending it wasn't happening. The silence made the moment feel even more isolating. Leona felt, for the first time in a long while, the weight of being the only black woman in a predominantly white space. It was a space that, despite being labeled as a beauty spot, did not appear to be prepared to understand what beauty meant for her and women like her. "See, it's working already," Rachel said with a satisfied grin, oblivious to the discomfort in Leona's eyes. "This stuff just really gets in there. Trust me, it's what's best for your hair." Leona's stomach churned as the harsh smell of the detergent mixed with the artificial fragrances of hair products in the air. It made her feel nauseous, but she swallowed it down. She could feel the detergent drying out her scalp, making it tighter with every second. She clenched her fists, determined to remain composed. The time for confrontation would come, but not yet. She could already feel the tension bubbling up inside her, the need to correct this situation, to make Rachel see how wrong she was. But there was something else. Leona had always been an advocate, a speaker, a fighter for the rights of women like her, black women who wore their hair naturally, who embraced their curls and kinks with pride. This moment was more than just a personal slight. It was a reminder of why she had created Curl Glow. Why she had spent countless hours designing haircare products specifically for textured hair. It wasn't just about beauty, it was about dignity. It was about breaking down the stereotypes, the misconceptions, the deep-seated biases that society had about black hair. And yet, here she was, being treated like her hair was something to be dealt with, something to be scrubbed and tamed with an industrial-grade cleaning product. Leona didn't want to be just another voice in the void. She wanted to make a difference. She wanted this to matter. She wanted Rachel, and anyone else who had ever been complicit in these kinds of microaggressions, to understand the weight of what they were doing. After what felt like an eternity, Rachel finally rinsed Leona's hair, the harsh chemicals of the detergent still lingering in the air. Leona's scalp burned slightly, and the irritation was almost unbearable. She had learned long ago how important it was to trust the right products for your hair, products that were formulated to nurture and protect textured hair, not damage it. Rachel moved to grab a comb and some finishing products, still talking, still completely unaware of the discomfort she had caused. Just as Rachel's back was turned, a young woman with long braids, one of the salon assistants, approached Leona quietly. Her name, as Leona would later learn, was Kesha. She had been observing the situation from across the room, her eyes showing a mix of sympathy and embarrassment. Kesha leaned down slightly and whispered, "I'm so sorry about what just happened. That wasn't right. I don't know why she did that." Leona was taken aback. She had been so focused on the experience that she hadn't noticed Kesha's discomfort. But now that the young woman had spoken up, Leona could sense the sincerity in her voice. Kesha seemed genuinely upset by Rachel's actions. "I've tried to talk to Rachel about this before," Kesha continued, her voice quiet but earnest. "She doesn't listen to me. But I know this isn't right. Your hair, it deserves respect. You deserve respect." Leona looked up at Kesha, her heart warmed by the young woman's empathy. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to her. In a moment when she felt completely alone, Kesha's words were like a lifeline. For a moment, Leona simply nodded, unsure of what to say. But then, an idea began to form in her mind. Maybe this wasn't just about her. Maybe this was about something much bigger. Maybe it was time for Rachel, and everyone who thought this way, to understand the deeper ramifications of treating textured hair with such disdain. The seed of determination was planted. As Rachel turned back to Leona with a smug smile, ready to apply a finishing cream, Leona knew that the moment for action was coming. But this time, it wasn't about yelling or fighting. It was about making sure Rachel, and everyone who heard the story, understood just how wrong she was. Leona took a deep breath, and with calm resolve, she said, "Rachel, can I ask you something?" The confrontation, a moment of clarity and truth. Leona's heart pounded in her chest as Rachel turned back toward her with a plastic container in hand, ready to apply the next product to her hair. The harsh chemical smell of the laundry detergent still clung to her scalp, mingling with the growing sense of unease that had taken root deep within her. But despite the discomfort, a quiet determination settled over her. This was not just about her hair, it was about standing up for something much larger. It was about making sure that what had just happened would not be swept under the rug as yet another subtle instance of disrespect that would go unchallenged. She looked around the salon. Most of the clients had resumed their conversations, distracted by their phones or flipping through fashion magazines. Kesha, the young woman who had shown her a moment of compassion just moments ago, was still standing nearby, her posture tense. She had not said anything else, but Leona could see the silent solidarity in her eyes. Rachel, oblivious to the turmoil Leona was experiencing, smiled in a way that suggested she thought everything was going smoothly. "All right, we're almost done," she said, moving toward Leona with a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. "You'll feel so much better once we get this finished. Your hair will look amazing. I promise." Leona took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. This was it. The moment when silence would no longer serve her. It was time to take control of the narrative. To show Rachel that disrespecting her and her hair, and by extension, all textured hair, was not something she was willing to let slide. "Rachel," Leona said, her voice calm but firm, as she sat up straighter in the chair. Can I ask you something? Rachel paused, mid-step, and glanced at Leona, clearly not expecting a question. Sure, she replied, her tone casual, still unaware of the storm brewing behind Leona's composed exterior. Why, Leona continued, maintaining eye contact, do you think laundry detergent is an acceptable product to use on my hair? The question hung in the air like a cloud, heavy with implication. Rachel blinked, as if the directness of the question had caught her off guard. She faltered for a moment before responding, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. Well, I've been using it for years on clients with curly hair, and it works better than any of the expensive products out there. It breaks down oils, removes buildup. Your hair is just different. It needs something more powerful. This is what works. Leona remained silent for a moment, absorbing the explanation that sounded more like a poorly constructed justification than a rational answer. She had expected this, Rachel's defensive posture, her inability to recognize the harm she had caused. But Leona wasn't going to let it end there. Not today. Not with so many women like her, black women with textured hair, who had been quietly enduring this kind of ignorance for far too long. No, Leona finally said, her voice steady but unwavering. It doesn't work. What it does is damage. It strips the moisture out of my hair, irritates my scalp, and leaves it feeling raw. It's not meant for hair, it's meant for clothes. And the fact that you think this is an acceptable solution says a lot more about your understanding of hair care than you realize. Rachel looked taken aback. The smugness in her expression began to fade, replaced by a faint flicker of uncertainty. But rather than acknowledging the gravity of what she had done, she continued to defend herself, still blind to the bigger issue at hand. Well, you've got to understand, Rachel said, her voice now tinged with annoyance, I've been doing this for a long time. My clients love it. No one has ever complained. If it works, why fix what isn't broken? Leona felt a pulse of frustration rise in her chest. The arrogance in Rachel's response was like a slap to the face, an implication that her expertise, years of research, development, and the creation of products specifically for textured hair, meant nothing in comparison to Rachel's casual experimentation with harsh detergents. But Leona, in that moment, realized that Rachel's ignorance wasn't something to be met with just anger, it was something to be corrected, to be educated. It was an opportunity to teach, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been told their natural hair was unkempt, unprofessional, or inferior. Leona leaned forward slightly, her tone now taking on a measured, deliberate quality. Rachel, I'm not asking you to change your business model, or tell you how to run your salon. But I am asking you to understand that textured hair is not the same as straight hair. It's not just something to deal with. It's beautiful, and it requires care, products that are designed for it, not whatever happens to be sitting on your shelf. I've spent years working in this industry, building a company that creates products for hair like mine. The people who use my products trust me to help them treat their hair with the care and respect it deserves. Rachel opened her mouth as if to speak, but Leona held up a hand to stop her. And that's what this is about, Leona continued. Respect. You didn't just apply a product to my hair. You applied your assumptions. You didn't ask what kind of hair I have, you didn't ask about my hair care routine, or what I need. You looked at me, you looked at my hair, and you decided that I needed something stronger, something more powerful to tame it. And that, Rachel, is where you went wrong. This hair isn't something to be tamed. It's something to be celebrated. For a moment, the entire salon seemed to go silent. The other clients, who had been chatting among themselves, now looked up, their conversations dying down as they watched the scene unfold. Rachel stood frozen, her hand still clutching the comb as she stared at Leona, stunned by the unexpected turn of events. Kesha, standing just a few feet away, couldn't help but give a small nod of approval. Her eyes, wide with admiration for Leona's courage, locked onto the businesswoman's. Leona didn't need to say anything more, Kesha already understood. Rachel, finally breaking the silence, let out a nervous chuckle. I didn't mean any disrespect, I just thought. I thought I was doing what was best. I didn't realize, she trailed off, realizing that her words were no longer making the impact she had intended. Leona, sensing that Rachel was finally beginning to understand, at least a little, took a deep breath, her voice softening but still firm. I understand that you didn't mean to disrespect me. But what you've done is a reminder of how deeply ingrained these stereotypes are. How black women's hair, especially textured hair, is still seen as something other, something that needs to be controlled. And that, Rachel, is something that needs to change. Rachel stood in silence for a few moments, her eyes downcast as she processed what Leona had said. The tension in the room was palpable. The weight of Leona's words had settled on Rachel like a heavy mantle, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Rachel had no response. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again, realizing that there was nothing left to say. Leona's calm but unyielding stance had shifted the dynamic in the salon. It wasn't just about her experience anymore, it was about everyone who had ever been overlooked, ignored, or disrespected for something as intrinsic as their natural hair. Leona wasn't just a businesswoman or a client in this moment, she was a voice for every woman who had ever been told her natural beauty was not enough. I'm going to leave now, Leona said, standing up from the chair, her posture straight and strong. But I'll be sharing this experience. Not to get you in trouble, Rachel. Not to ruin your business. But because people need to understand that black hair is not a joke. It's not something to be ridiculed, and it's definitely not something to be treated with laundry detergent. Rachel opened her mouth to say something, but Leona had already turned toward the door. She didn't need to hear more excuses. She didn't need Rachel's guilt or her apologies. What she needed was for Rachel, and for everyone else who shared her misguided beliefs, to understand the impact of their actions. Leona walked out of Rachel's beauty spot with a quiet sense of pride. She didn't need to shout, didn't need to make a scene. Her words, calm and measured, had made the point far more effectively than any angry outburst could have. As she stepped out onto the bustling streets of Harlem, Leona took a deep breath. She had confronted ignorance. She had done more than just fight for her own dignity, she had fought for all of the women whose voices had been silenced by similar moments of disrespect. And this, she knew, was just the beginning. The aftermath, ripple effects and the power of one voice. The sound of the door closing behind her was a small, unremarkable sound. But to Leona Harris, it was the sound of something momentous, the sound of a decision made, of a door closed on the past, and of a future that would unfold in unexpected ways. As she walked down the bustling streets of Harlem, past the colorful murals and the quick footsteps of the neighborhood's diverse inhabitants, a sense of calm began to settle over her. Her anger, though real, had dissipated. In its place was something much stronger, resolve. It wasn't just about what had happened at Rachel's beauty spot anymore. It was about the conversation she had just started, not just with Rachel, but with every single person who would hear her story. The decision to share her experience wasn't one made on a whim. It was a calculated move, a strategic step to shed light on a pattern of ignorance that affected not just her, but countless others who had been made to feel less than for something as basic as their natural hair. Leona didn't yet know how this moment would play out, but one thing was certain, her voice would not be silenced. Not this time. That evening, as the golden light of sunset filtered through the windows of her apartment in Harlem, Leona sat down in front of her laptop. She had been putting off creating content for her own personal platform, something she had neglected during the whirlwind of growing her cosmetics business, CurlGlow, but now felt the deep need to speak. Not just for herself, but for the millions of black women who had faced similar microaggressions, those who had been made to feel their hair was something to be fixed, controlled, or tamed. The video started with her name, a calm introduction to her brand and her mission. But then, as she began recounting her experience at Rachel's beauty spot, something shifted within her. The raw emotion she had been holding in came rushing out as she described the way Rachel had treated her hair, how the laundry detergent had felt on her scalp, how the assumption that her natural curls needed something harsher than what the world had designed for straight hair had been insulting on every level. Leona spoke not in anger, but in truth. She wanted her message to be clear: black hair wasn't a problem to be solved. It wasn't a challenge to be conquered. It was beautiful. And it deserved respect, care, and the same high standards applied to straight hair. She explained how her company Curl Glow had been born out of a desire to give women like her a chance to embrace their natural hair and find the right products for it, products that celebrated texture, not tried to erase it. The video was honest, raw, and vulnerable. It wasn't about exposing Rachel, it was about exposing a culture of ignorance that was pervasive in salons, beauty standards, and beyond. It wasn't just about one woman's mistake, it was about the systemic ways in which black beauty had been disrespected and devalued for centuries. Leona uploaded the video, her fingers trembling slightly as she hit the publish button. It felt almost surreal to have her experience broadcast to the world. She had no idea what kind of response it would generate, but she knew that something powerful was now in motion. The ripple effects. Within hours, the video had gone viral. Comments flooded her inbox and social media. Women from all over the world shared their own stories of discrimination in salons. Black women from different countries, South Africa, the UK, Canada, and beyond, shared their experiences of having their hair treated as problematic or unprofessional. Many spoke of their own encounters with beauty professionals who lacked the knowledge to handle textured hair with care, and how they too had been told their hair was too wild, too coarse, or too difficult. Some women shared painful stories of salons using products not meant for textured hair, products that stripped, damaged, or burned their scalp. Others spoke about the emotional toll it took to constantly defend their hair, their beauty, and their worth in spaces that were supposed to make them feel good about themselves. There was a shared sense of relief in the comments, a collective exhale, because Leona's story was not just hers alone. It resonated with so many women who had suffered in silence. But there were also stories of those who had fought back. Women who had stood their ground in salons, demanding respect for their hair and, by extension, for themselves. These were the voices of strength and resilience, showing Leona that the fight for black hair pride wasn't a solo endeavor, it was a collective struggle, one that had been ongoing for decades, if not longer. Leona was overwhelmed by the support. What started as a personal story about an uncomfortable experience in a Harlem salon had quickly become a global conversation about beauty standards, cultural appropriation, and the ways in which black women had been forced to fit into a narrow mold of acceptable beauty. Leona's message was simple, but powerful: textured hair was beautiful, and it deserved respect. No exceptions. The backlash. But not all of the response was positive. As the video continued to gain traction, the backlash soon followed. Rachel's beauty spot, the small salon that had been the setting for the humiliating experience, was inundated with negative reviews. Former clients, many of whom were women of color, began posting scathing comments about their own experiences at the salon. Some shared photos of their damaged hair, while others wrote about the lack of care they had received for their textured hair. It didn't take long for Rachel's name to be attached to the story, and the online criticism grew. Rachel, who had been oblivious to the storm brewing, soon found herself in the spotlight. At first, she tried to dismiss the backlash as the work of a disgruntled customer, assuming that Leona's video would fade into the background like so many others on the internet. But the response was too widespread, too powerful. Her business began to suffer. The phone calls from angry clients kept coming. Some of her longtime customers, who had been loyal to her for years, pulled their appointments, citing her lack of cultural competency in dealing with textured hair. The salon's online ratings plummeted. Rachel's panic set in as she realized the gravity of what had happened. She had underestimated the power of social media, and the power of one voice. She had also underestimated the growing awareness among the public of the systemic nature of racism and the deep-seated issues surrounding beauty standards, particularly for women of color. In a desperate attempt to salvage her reputation, Rachel issued an apology on her salon's social media pages. "I never meant to hurt anyone," the post read, "and I deeply regret using the wrong product on my client. I have always tried to provide the best service, but I realize now that my lack of knowledge has caused harm. I am committed to learning more about textured hair care and ensuring that this never happens again." But it was too little, too late. The damage had already been done. People were no longer interested in Rachel's apology, they were interested in seeing real, lasting change. The salon's Facebook and Instagram pages became battlegrounds, with critics demanding that Rachel either take responsibility for her actions or shut down entirely. A turning point. Amidst the chaos, Leona took a step back. The vitriol from some corners of the internet didn't faze her. She had dealt with backlash before, especially from people who didn't understand the importance of black hair pride. But what she saw emerging from the wreckage was even more important, an opportunity to educate. She knew Rachel's actions were a symptom of a much larger issue, one that affected salons, the beauty industry, and society as a whole. The conversation had shifted. People weren't just discussing one woman's ignorance, they were questioning the broader norms of beauty standards and cultural appropriation. They were rethinking how textured hair was treated in the media, in salons, and in everyday life. Leona knew she could be a part of this change. Her voice, amplified by social media, had the power to educate. To create awareness. To shift the narrative. She took to Instagram again, not to attack Rachel, but to continue the conversation. "This is not just about one salon," she said in a video, her expression calm but resolute. "It's about a system that has long ignored the beauty of textured hair. We've been told for years that our curls, our kinks, our afros are less than, that they need to be fixed, tamed, or straightened to fit into someone else's idea of beauty. But we're done with that. It's time to start celebrating our natural beauty and demanding respect for it." Leona's words resonated deeply with her audience. She wasn't just a victim, she was a leader, a voice for change in an industry that had overlooked black beauty for far too long. Her message was clear: respect was the key to everything. Respect for textured hair. Respect for black culture. And respect for the choices women made to wear their hair as it naturally grew from their scalps. As she continued to speak out, Leona began to hear from other women in the industry who had faced similar challenges. Stylists, hairdressers, and business owners who had long recognized the gap in the beauty industry when it came to textured hair. Leona was invited to speak on podcasts, in webinars, and at industry conferences. She was asked to collaborate with other beauty brands, to use her voice to demand change on a larger scale. And so, what began as a moment of personal frustration became a turning point, not just for Leona, but for the entire beauty industry. The fight for textured hair pride was no longer a quiet, individual battle. It was a movement. Leona knew that her journey was only beginning. But one thing was certain: she had started something powerful, something that would ripple through the beauty world and beyond, touching countless lives and changing the way we think about hair, beauty, and identity. The reckoning, facing consequences, embracing change. The days following the video's release were a whirlwind of activity for Leona. Her inbox was flooded, her phone ringing constantly. What had started as a personal decision to share her experience had rapidly grown into a much larger movement, one that had captured the attention of not just everyday people, but media outlets, beauty influencers, and even industry professionals who had long turned a blind eye to the realities of textured hair care. As her social media following skyrocketed, Leona received an outpouring of support, but also a series of confrontations from those who disagreed with her stance. Some had been customers of Rachel's beauty spot for years and defended the salon, claiming Rachel's use of laundry detergent was an isolated mistake, a misjudgment born out of a lack of understanding rather than malice. Others, however, condemned Rachel's actions as symptomatic of a larger cultural problem within the beauty industry, a persistent, damaging disregard for black hair. One morning, as Leona sat at her desk overlooking the skyline of Harlem, her phone buzzed with another email. She had grown accustomed to the constant notifications, but this one caught her attention. It was from an anonymous source, a former employee at Rachel's beauty spot, claiming that Rachel had made similar remarks about black hair in the past, describing it as difficult or unruly. The email went on to explain how the salon had a reputation for offering special services for black clients, which typically involved using harsher products or unconventional treatments. Leona felt a knot form in her stomach as she read the message. It wasn't just that Rachel had made a mistake with her, Leona had come to realize that this was part of a deeply rooted problem within the salon itself. For every person who defended Rachel's actions, there were others who saw the bigger picture, an institution that, through ignorance or indifference, had perpetuated harmful stereotypes about black hair. This realization stirred something in Leona. Her initial reaction had been one of personal outrage, and rightly so. But now, as the layers of the situation unfolded, she realized that this was a moment for not just confrontation, but for transformation. It wasn't enough for Rachel's beauty spot to apologize or for a few scattered voices to speak out. What was needed was a broader, more systemic change in how black hair was treated across the beauty industry. Meanwhile, Rachel's situation had only gotten worse. The viral backlash had hit the salon hard, and the negative reviews kept pouring in. People were calling for accountability, but Rachel, caught in the storm of public criticism, had no clear path forward. She had issued a public apology on the salon's Instagram account, claiming that she was deeply sorry for her actions and that she was committed to learning more about textured hair. "I made a terrible mistake," the post read. "As a business owner, it's my responsibility to ensure that every client who walks through my door feels respected. I failed in this instance, and for that, I am truly sorry." Yet, the apology felt hollow to many. It was one thing to say the right words, but the public was demanding action. Was Rachel truly willing to confront her prejudices? Was she committed to transforming the way she approached black clients, or was this simply damage control? Leona, despite her personal feelings toward Rachel, realized that this moment of reckoning could be an opportunity for both of them. Rachel, if she was truly open to change, could use this situation to learn, to grow, and to redefine how she ran her business. But that would require more than just an apology, it would require a genuine commitment to education, humility, and transformation. And Leona, though deeply hurt by Rachel's actions, had a responsibility to herself and to others to ensure that this moment wasn't wasted. The call to action. Leona's next move was not to tear down Rachel's reputation, but to offer something far more powerful, the opportunity for education and accountability. She didn't want Rachel's beauty spot to disappear, nor did she want to destroy the livelihood of a small business owner. What Leona wanted was to initiate change, to encourage Rachel to take real steps toward understanding the cultural significance of textured hair and the damage that ignorance could do. One evening, after a long day of responding to media inquiries and messages from supporters, Leona sat down to write Rachel an email. She knew that, in many ways, Rachel had already lost a significant portion of her clientele. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about using this moment of crisis as a vehicle for growth, for both Rachel and the beauty industry at large. "Dear Rachel," Leona wrote, her fingers flying over the keys with surprising calm. "I know you are going through a difficult time right now, and I want to offer you something. We both know what happened at your salon, and while I'm still deeply hurt by the experience, I also believe that this could be a turning point. I would like to invite you to join me in a dialogue about textured hair, about what it means to truly care for it, respect it, and honor it. I want to be clear, this isn't about attacking you, but about moving beyond the mistakes we've both made. If you are open to learning, I would be happy to collaborate with you in creating an educational program for salons, one that focuses on proper hair care for black clients and teaches stylists how to celebrate all types of hair, rather than fix them. I know this won't be easy, but I believe it's an opportunity for both of us to make a difference. Let me know if you're willing to talk further. Warm regards. Leona Harris. She sat back in her chair, reading over the email before hitting send. She didn't know how Rachel would respond. Part of her expected more defensiveness, more resistance. But there was also a small part of her that hoped Rachel would take the opportunity for self-reflection seriously. As the email went out into the ether, Leona closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, a sense of quiet determination settling over her. She wasn't sure what would come of it. But what she did know was that she was offering Rachel a chance to be part of something bigger than herself. A chance to become an ally in the movement toward recognizing and celebrating Black beauty in all its forms. The unexpected response. The following morning, as Leona was preparing for an interview with a podcast about Black beauty in the media, her phone buzzed with an email notification. She opened it, her eyes scanning the message with a mix of anticipation and skepticism. It was from Rachel. Leona, the email began, "Thank you for your message. I've had some time to reflect on what's happened, and I'll be honest, it hasn't been easy. I've been reading a lot, talking to clients, and trying to understand what I missed in the past. I have come to realize that I need to do better. Not just for my business, but for every person who walks through my door. I want to learn, and I would be honored to work with you on this. Let's set up a time to talk about how we can collaborate on creating an educational program for salons. I am committed to making changes, and I hope I can earn your trust again. Sincerely. Rachel." Leona stared at the screen, absorbing the weight of Rachel's words. She wasn't sure if Rachel's apology was sincere or if this was simply an attempt to save face. But what mattered was that Rachel was acknowledging her mistake and was open to the possibility of change. Leona didn't respond right away. She knew that this would take time. There would need to be tough conversations, uncomfortable moments, and a long road ahead for both of them. But Leona was determined. If Rachel was willing to learn, willing to take responsibility, then Leona was ready to be part of that process. She responded with a message that was direct, yet hopeful. "Thank you for your openness, Rachel. I'm glad to hear you're willing to take this step. Let's schedule a meeting and discuss what this could look like. We're in this together now, and I'm ready to make sure this conversation goes beyond just us. I want to help create lasting change, both for you and for the entire beauty industry." As Leona sent the reply, she felt a small shift inside her. This wasn't just about fixing what had been broken, it was about building something new. It was about taking a painful experience and turning it into an opportunity for growth and transformation. The ripple effect was continuing, and Leona was determined to see it through to the end. The fight for Black beauty was just beginning, and she was ready to lead the way. Transformation, a journey of growth, reconciliation, and the ripple effect. The weeks that followed Rachel's apology and Leona's counterproposal were filled with tension and anticipation. Both women had taken bold steps in their respective roles, Leona, as a leader in the movement for Black beauty and hair care, and Rachel, as a salon owner seeking to confront her ignorance and make amends. What had initially seemed like an isolated incident in a Harlem salon was now poised to spark a much larger conversation. A conversation about cultural competency, beauty standards, and respect for natural textures. Leona had made it clear from the outset that this wasn't a process that would be easy or fast. It would require a deep commitment to learning and unlearning, to facing uncomfortable truths, and to taking actionable steps toward change. She wasn't expecting Rachel to magically transform overnight, but she wanted her to take the process seriously, and above all, to lead by example in an industry that had, for far too long, failed to fully recognize the value of textured hair. The first meeting, a step toward accountability. The first meeting between Leona and Rachel was set up in a small cafe in Harlem, the same neighborhood where the incident had occurred. It felt fitting. Harlem was not just the heart of New York's African American community, it was also the epicenter of the civil rights movement, a place where the black community had historically fought to assert its identity, its value, and its place in American society. Rachel, a woman in her mid-40s, walked into the cafe with a mixture of anxiety and resolve written across her face. She was dressed in a black jacket and slacks, looking more formal than the laid-back, bohemian salon owner Leona had initially met. The transformation in her appearance was subtle but striking. She had clearly taken time to reconsider her role in the larger societal context. Leona, for her part, had chosen to dress simply, her natural curls now neatly shaped into a voluminous, bouncy style that perfectly framed her face. She had come to view her hair as an emblem of her personal journey. A journey of self-empowerment and pride that had given her a renewed sense of purpose. As they sat down at a corner table, the conversation started with small pleasantries, but it quickly shifted to the heart of the matter. Leona, in her calm, measured tone, began by reiterating her position. She wasn't there to lecture Rachel, but rather to share knowledge. The conversation needed to be a dialogue, not a monologue. Rachel, Leona began, this isn't just about you or me. This is about an industry-wide problem that affects millions of women every day. It's about the lack of education on how to care for textured hair, and the harmful assumptions made when someone like me walks into a salon. Rachel nodded, her hands fidgeting with a cup of tea as she processed the weight of Leona's words. I get that now, she said, her voice tentative. I didn't see it before. I honestly thought I was helping you by trying to deal with the texture of your hair. But I see now how ignorant that was, and how offensive. Leona could sense the sincerity in Rachel's voice. It wasn't an apology born out of guilt, but one rooted in the recognition of harm caused, something deeper than surface-level remorse. That gave Leona hope. The beauty industry has spent decades upholding standards of beauty that are rooted in Eurocentric ideals, Leona continued. Textured hair, in particular, has often been ignored, misunderstood, or outright vilified. But the fact is that textured hair is not a problem to be solved. It's beautiful in its natural form. It just requires different care, and for that, professionals need the right education. Rachel looked down at her hands, then back up at Leona. I had no idea the extent of the ignorance in the industry. I've worked in salons all my life, and while I always prided myself on being a good stylist, I didn't know what I didn't know. Leona leaned in, her voice steady but compassionate. That's where we start. We can't change the past, but we can change how we move forward. We need to create education and awareness, not just for you and me, but for the entire salon industry. And we need to put people in positions of power who understand the value of textured hair. The plan for change. Over the next few weeks, Leona and Rachel worked together to map out a plan for the future of Rachel's beauty spot, and to develop an educational program that could be shared with other salons. This was no small task, but Leona was determined to see it through. It was clear to her that the problem at Rachel's salon wasn't a reflection of malice but a reflection of ignorance, and ignorance could be changed. The first step was education. Rachel agreed to enroll in a series of professional development courses focused on textured hair, which Leona personally recommended. These included classes on hair porosity, the science of curls, the importance of using specific products designed for textured hair, and the cultural significance of black hair. Leona also offered to provide resources on cultural competency, helping Rachel understand the ways in which language and attitude toward hair could influence a customer's experience. Leona insisted that Rachel open her salon to professionals in the black hair care community, including well-respected black stylists and beauty experts who could give direct training on how to work with textured hair. Rachel agreed, understanding that the best way to provide comprehensive care for her clients was to learn from those who had lived and worked within the black beauty community. The next part of their plan was to host a series of community outreach programs. Leona was firm about this point. Rachel's beauty spot needed to demonstrate, in tangible ways, that it was committed to change. She suggested they host free workshops for the local community, workshops about hair care, confidence building, and the cultural significance of black hair. The goal was not only to teach techniques but to provide a space where black women could feel celebrated and respected for their natural beauty. Through these efforts, Leona also encouraged Rachel to shift her branding. It wasn't enough to simply educate her staff, she needed to send a message to the broader public that Rachel's Beauty Spot was a place where all types of hair were welcomed and respected. The salon would need to revamp its marketing materials to highlight its newfound commitment to textured hair care, ensuring that women of all races and hair types knew that Rachel's was a place of inclusion and acceptance. The public rebuilding. In the meantime, Leona kept up the pressure on social media, ensuring that the message about black hair pride remained front and center. She used her platform to highlight salons and beauty professionals who were making a conscious effort to learn about and respect textured hair. At the same time, she used her influence to provide a balanced narrative about Rachel's efforts to change. Leona wasn't naive. She knew there would be skepticism. She knew that some people would always view Rachel's actions as a token gesture or as an attempt to save face. But what Leona also knew was that real change wasn't about perfection, it was about accountability and a willingness to evolve. Rachel had taken responsibility for her actions, and now it was time to see whether her commitment to change was genuine. The public responded in various ways. Some clients came back to Rachel's Beauty Spot, hesitant but willing to give her a second chance. Others refused to forgive, believing that the harm had been done beyond repair. Still, the fact that Rachel was making strides to educate herself and her staff was a step forward. And over time, the message of inclusion began to stick. Leona's work, however, was far from done. Her commitment to the cause continued to grow, not just through her own brand, CurlGlow, but through continued advocacy for textured hair in the beauty industry. She was invited to sit on panels, speak at conferences, and write articles on the importance of cultural competency in salons. Leona also started receiving messages from women who had been empowered by her story, not just women with textured hair, but women of all backgrounds who had struggled with their own identity, whether it was because of skin color, body size, or cultural heritage. Leona realized that her journey had become a larger conversation about beauty, self-acceptance, and the power of owning one's identity in a world that often told you to conform. The ripple effect. As Rachel's Beauty Spot began to transform, so did the broader conversation in the beauty industry. Other salons, once indifferent to the specific needs of black hair, began to take notice. Leona's work sparked a ripple effect. As more and more people became aware of the importance of understanding textured hair, the demand for trained stylists who specialized in curly, kinky, and coiled hair grew. Beauty brands began to take note as well, introducing new products aimed specifically at textured hair. Leona's efforts were paying off. Not only had she contributed to the transformation of one small salon in Harlem, but she had sparked a much-needed conversation in the beauty world. She knew that there was still much work to be done, but she also knew that the seeds of change had been planted. And as Leona looked out over the skyline of Harlem, watching the sun dip behind the buildings, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey had been long and challenging, but it had been worth it. She had turned a moment of personal humiliation into a movement for cultural change, and in doing so, she had not only changed Rachel's Beauty Spot but had helped to shift the very narrative around black hair in the beauty industry. This was just the beginning.